Will the baby ever run free with no fear of destiny lost? Can they forgive our ignorant acts and all the lives that we've cost?
Once hundreds of thousands roam through the lands, freely enjoying their flight. Only 5,000 remain today to suffer the poor tiger's plight. Will the tigers ever run free with no fear of destiny lost? Can they forgive our ignorant acts?
Goodrich. I'm a conservation biologist, and I've been living and working in Russia for 11 years now, studying Siberian tigers.
And hi, Brian. Hi, Julie. Very good. And Antonia, do you have a question? Where do tigers sleep when it snows?
Tigers don't really do anything special when it snows, Antonia. They just curl up under a tree and let the snow cover them over, which is the same thing that they do if it's raining or if it's nice out. They just sleep out in the woods, curled up under a tree.
What do tigers eat and their babies eat?
Tigers anywhere in the world will feed on whatever the most abundant ungulates are. Ungulates are hooved animals, so like deer or antelope. So in Russia, where Siberian tigers live, they feed mostly on elk and wild boar. But step out of it. We have here the antlers of a Sika deer that radio-collared tigress Lydia killed and ate just the other day. Lydia has 3 cubs, and we went in and searched in an area where she had been for 2 or 3 days with her cubs and found this Sika deer, and it was right up on a hill here behind us. She ate the entire thing. There wasn't any meat left at all. But of course they can't eat the antlers.
Now, would the cubs also be feeding on the deer, or would they still be nursing from mum?
These cubs are about 4 months old, so yes, they came into the kill with their mom and fed on the deer. So the way it works is mom hides her cubs up on a hilltop somewhere where there's lots of nice dense brush for them to hide in, and she goes out hunting. When she kills something, then she goes and gets the cubs and takes them to the kill. So in this case, she went and got the cubs, and they went in and ate this Sika deer and then left. When cubs are very little, when they're first born, of course, they nurse and they drink only milk. But when they're about 3 months old, mom starts taking them in to eat meat at kills.
Do
tigers hug?
Oh, that's a good question. Do they cuddle?
Don't really know if tigers hug, but they're not designed very well for hugging. Think about, they walk on 4 feet, so think about your dog. If your dogs can't really hug, because it's hard for them to stand up straight. But tigers are affectionate towards each other. So for example, when a male and female tiger meet, they'll often kind of rub their faces together. The same way your house cat rubs his face against things. Tigers will rub their cheeks together and that sort of thing.
Sweetie?
Where do tigers live?
Where do they live?
Tigers in general are found throughout Asia. So we have Bengal tigers down in India, we have Indo-Chinese tigers down in Thailand and Vietnam. In China there's the South China tiger, and Sumatra, the Sumatran tiger, and there are many other countries where tigers live. But Siberian tigers are found almost exclusively in Russia. And the name Siberian tigers is a little bit misleading because Siberian tigers are not found in Siberia. They're found in the Russian Far East, which is further east than Siberia. So Siberian tigers are found almost exclusively in Russia, but there are a few in northern China and in northern North Korea.
Can tigers
Swim in water.
Sure, tigers swim, and they like to swim. When it's hot out during the summer, which is hard to imagine, it's very cold right now and snowy, but summers here get quite warm and we get temperatures of up to 90 degrees during the day. And tigers will swim or they'll lay around in creeks and water to cool off.
Why are tigers in danger and what are the threats to tigers?
Tigers are so endangered for two reasons, and these are the major threats. One is poaching. People kill tigers so that they can sell their skins mostly to rich businessmen, and to sell their parts, especially tiger bones, which are used in Asian traditional medicine as different types of medicine. A tiger's skin and bones together are worth between $5,000 and $10,000. For many people in Russia, that's like a year's salary. So a tiger's worth a lot of money. The second major threat to tigers is habitat destruction. From people cutting down forests for lumber, from mining, all sorts of things like that. In Russia, habitat destruction isn't a huge problem. It's not an immediate problem the way poaching is, but it's a problem that we need to very much pay attention to, because when habitat is destroyed, it can take hundreds of years to recover. So we need to be very careful to make sure that people do not destroy habitat, because if they do, there will be no place for tigers to live. Whereas if too many tigers are poached, we can then protect them and the populations will quickly recover. But if habitat is destroyed, it may take over 100 years for populations to recover.
And what do you do to save tigers?
So the main thing that I do here in Russia to save tigers is I conduct scientific research on tiger ecology. That is, I try to learn as much as I can about tigers so that we can use the information in developing conservation plans for tigers. So for example, if we want to protect tigers, we need to protect their food. If we're going to protect their food, we need to first learn what tigers eat. So I conduct those sorts of research, and we do that through radio tracking. We capture tigers and put radio collars on them, and this is a radio collar that was on a female tiger. And with this radio collar, we can then follow their movements and learn follow them wherever they go, learn how much they move, when they move, what they eat, where they have cubs, and so on. This radio collar was cut off by poachers. Unfortunately, this tigress's name was Natasha, and she was poached while she was walking down a road, and all we found was the radio collar. So I can turn on my radio receiver here, and up on the hill behind us we have a tigress named Lydia, who's got 3 4-month-old cubs with her. And that's Lydia's signal, and with this antenna, what direction she's in.
And she's just up on that hillside behind the cabin there.
Yeah. And we spent the night in that cabin while we came into this area to track Lydia because she's been in here for several days. So when we went up and searched the area where Lydia was, we found this Sika deer that she had killed and eaten with her cubs. And there were lots and lots of cub tracks in the snow. And you could see where the cubs have been playing and sliding down hills and running all around. And that suggests that if the cubs are playing a lot, that means that they're nice and fat and healthy. So that's a good sign. I also have here a radio collar that we use for very small cubs. And of course, cubs grow very rapidly, so when we put a radio collar on, we have to put a radio collar on that stretches. So this collar stretches open.
Hold it down a bit.
What's that?
Hold it down, yeah, just there.
Okay. We also put radio collars on the tiger cubs. Of course, cubs grow very quickly, so when we put a radio collar on, it has to be a collar that can stretch. So here's a cub collar, and as the cub grows, the collar is elastic and it stretches about to the size of an adult female tiger's neck. And this collar was actually on one of Lydia's cubs. We put it on the cub in September, but when the cubs were about 3 months old, they got to playing and chewing and chewed the radio collar off. So.
Grant McNulty.
Okay.
I won in the art by Francesca Owens called The Release. You have Victor. What is Victor's story?
Very good. Okay.
Grant, Victor's story is one of my favorite stories because it was a really exciting event for me. Victor was an adult male tiger, a very fat and healthy, beautiful tiger, and he got caught in a poacher's snare. And this snare was a big heavy wire cable that caught him right around his chest. 2 wildlife biology students were out doing a survey and counting tiger tracks, and they found Victor alive in this snare. So these 2 students ran 3 or 4 miles in waist-deep snow to get to a cabin where there was a car, and that car had to drive 50 miles to get to the nearest phone because Victor lives in a very wild area. So somebody drove and made a phone call to a government agency called Inspection Tiger that deals with these types of problems. That agency then called us because we have the equipment and the expertise to anesthetize tigers, and we responded and went and anesthetized Victor and got him out of the snare. We had to drive all night to get there to rescue him, and we found him, got there just in the morning. We anesthetized him and examined him, and he looked okay. He had some pretty bad scrapes on his chest, but nothing that wouldn't heal. But still, we weren't sure if maybe he had some internal injuries or something. So we took Victor into captivity for a week just to observe him and make sure that he was okay. And after a week, he seemed to be fine. So we took him back to the site where we had captured him and released him, and that's the picture that you've all seen. And the painting that Francesca did of the tiger jumping out of the back of the truck, that's Victor leaping to freedom back into the wild. One of the reasons I like this story so much is that very few tigers that get caught in a snare can ever hope to survive the ordeal. So this one was kind of a chalk one up for the good guys type of story, where a lot of people worked really hard to save this tiger and return him to the wilds. And he's still alive and well and wandering in the same area today.
How do local people feel about your work for tiger conservation?
For the most part, local people have been very receptive to us. We were some of the first Americans ever to come into this area. They've been very receptive of us, and local people are proud of their tigers and support our work. But many people will say, well, if you ask them, do you want there to be tigers in the wild? Most people will answer yes, but only on the reserves, only on the protected areas. In other words, people don't want tigers in their backyard. The problem with that is the protected areas aren't nearly big enough to save entire tiger populations. So, for example, where we are standing right now is the Sikhote-Alin Reserve, and it's 4,000 square kilometers. But that's big enough only for about 20 tigers. And 20 tigers is not big enough to protect a population over the long term. If there's just 20 tigers, we'd have problems with inbreeding and things like that, and over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, those tigers would all die. So we need huge areas to protect Siberian tigers. So for example, where tigers exist right now is an area that's about the size and shape of the state of California. And in that area there are about 450 tigers. And we need all of that area if we're going to protect tigers.
How much tigers are there left in the wild, approximately?
How many tigers are left in Russia?
For Siberian tigers, there are about 450 left in the wild, and most of those occur in Russia. There's maybe 10 or 20 in northern China and maybe 10 or 20 in northern North Korea. And we just did a survey this past winter and counted 450. 10 years ago we did a survey and there was also about 450, so the population is stable, and that's good. So that's Siberian tigers. If we look at all tiger subspecies, there's probably only about 5,000 left in the wild. 100 years ago, there was probably 100,000 tigers. So that's how quickly and how dramatically their populations have declined.
Why are tigers orange and black?
Many people think that tigers are orange, and orange is a bright color, and so tigers will stand out very well. But really, tigers are really well camouflaged. Their orange here in Russia is the same color as the dead leaves on the forest floor, so they blend in really, really well. And those black stripes provide extra camouflage for them. When you see a tiger in the wild, it's usually not the orange color that stands out, but the white on their face is the first thing that you tend to notice. Also, most tiger prey species, like the elk and the wild boar that they feed on, don't see color. They see in black and white and shades of gray. So an orange color doesn't make any difference to an elk. It's more the hue of the color. So as long as the hue of a tiger is similar to the hue of the leaves or whatever on the forest floor, tiger is very well camouflaged.
And all the lives that we've caused, left all alone as a token or a prize, decorating a hunter's wall. for bodies so slim.